I'm Ari Goldstein, Senior Public Programs Producer at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Boris Lurie, Searching for Truth in Holocaust Images, a program that the museum is co-presenting with our friends and partners at the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art. We'll turn in a moment to Rachel Stern, who runs the Fritz Ascher Society, and to Sarah Softness, the museum's guest curator of the exhibition Boris Lurie, Nothing to Do But to Try, and they will introduce our guest today, Eckhart Gillen. If you have questions for Eckhart, please feel free to share them in the Zoom Q&A box any point during his lecture, and we'll save time for audience Q&A towards the end of the hour. Without further ado, thank you all for being here with us, and Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Ari. You can hear me? Never certain on that. I am really delighted to welcome everybody on behalf of the museum. As Ari mentioned, I am Sarah Softness. I am the guest curator of the exhibition Boris Lurie, Nothing to Do But to Try, which has occasioned this really wonderful and what is sure to be an illuminating lecture with a really renowned Lurie scholar, Dr. Eckhart Gillen. As Ari mentioned, this is in collaboration with the amazing Fritz Ascher Society. And I have to say, it was really only weeks after the, possibly even days only after the announcement of the exhibition that this program got into the works. So thank you, Ari, thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Dr. Gillen, for all of your enthusiasm there. I'm glad to see the day finally here. So just a bit of context, the Boris Lurie Nothing to Do But to Try exhibition is a first of its kind for the Museum of Jewish Heritage. It focuses on modern art as its principal mode of Holocaust remembrance. We understand Lurie's artwork in this exhibition as visual testimony. It's a way of describing both his own personal experiences as a Holocaust survivor and of communicating larger themes of grief and horror and guilt and resilience. And he does so through color, line, subject matter, composition, etc. I know Dr. Gillen will give us much to consider about Lurie's artistic choices, as well as kind of visualization of trauma more generally. So with that, very much hope you'll come see the exhibition in person if you're able, or return to see it if the case may be. The museum is open Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays. I want to thank the Boris Lurie Art Foundation, without whom none of this would be possible in our exhibition. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll give it over to Rachel Stern, as director and CEO of the Fritz Ascher Society. Thank you again, Rachel, for this wonderful collaboration, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Ari. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm delighted to co-present again with the Museum of Jewish Heritage for this important event. I'm Rachel Stern, Director and CEO of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art based in New York. We research, discuss, publish, and exhibit artists whose life and work were affected by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. With this work, we commemorate their lives and achievements. Today, I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Eckhart Gillen, who is an independent curator based in Berlin. He has organized numerous exhibitions and published widely on Russian, American, and German art of the 20th century. Among his exhibition catalogs and books are, and I quote just a very, very few to give you the range, German art from Beckmann to Richter, Images of a Divided Country, published by Yale University Press in 1997. In collaboration with Stephanie Barron, he curated Art of Two Germanys, Cold War Cultures, 1945 to 1989, which was on view at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, Germanisches Nationalmuseum Nürnberg, Deutsches Historisches Museum Berlin in 2009. Art in Europe, 1945-1968, Facing the Future, Beaux-Arts Brussels, ZKM Karlsruhe, Pushkin Museum Moscow in 2016-17. Constructing the World, Art and Economy, 1919 to 1939 in USA, Soviet Union and Germany at Kunsthalle Mannheim, 2018-19. Since 2013, Eckhart Gillen is adjunct professor for art history at the Film University in Potsdam-Babelsberg. His exhibition, Boris Lurie and Wolf Vostell, Art After Auschwitz, just opened this weekend at the Kunstmuseum Den Haag in the Netherlands, where it will be on view until May 29th. Welcome, Eckhart Gillen.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you very much. I start with a controversy between Lanzmann and Didi-Huberman about the possibility of images. And Lanzmann, who made this famous film SHOAH, said categorically he is rejecting pictures of the SHOAH. He had principally decided against the use of archived German genocide pictures in his film SHOAH. And he says, this stifles our thinking and deaden any power of imagination. It is incomparably better to direct all energy towards generating a memory of what happened, as I have done, favoring the film archives over the words of witnesses, as if the archives were superior, actually amounts to further disqualification of the human word in searching for the truth. In the dispute with Lanzmann, the French art historian Didi-Huberman defends images as a legitimate medium for remembering the German genocide experience in his book, Images in Spite of It All. The book is about 4 photographs. The book is about 4 photographs of Jewish members of the Special Command. Here you see them all 4. They are very famous, anonymous photographs. They were made from the crematorium 5 in Birkenau in August 1944. You see the Special Command having to get the corpse from the gas chamber and taking them to the crematoriums. The photos show the burning of naked corpses and a group of naked women being herded to the gas chamber. According to the book, it is precisely the will of the Jewish victims to hand down a visual testimony that were to make the photos so valuable. They had been developed by Polish resistance fighters in Warsaw and passed on. Against the Nazi regime's plan to eliminate any means of testimony, for example, a strict ban on taking photographs, the act of photographic resistance is successful. In 1956, they are part of the picture material for Night and Fog by Alain Resnais. They remained surrounded by the aura of hollowed horror that did not turn into objects of science. So in France, but also in German, remembrance and memorial culture, the dogma was sufferings and crimes inflicted in the National Socialist concentration and extermination camps are unimaginable and therefore also undepictable. In contrast, Didi-Huberman insists on the photograph's claim of making a point of contact with reality. German painter Gerhard Richter followed Claude Lanzmann and is doubting in general about the possibility of depicting the horrors of the genocide. He started in the early 1960s to collect photographs into German genocide on European Jews and photographic material, which he documented on opposite sides of his famous atlas. The same did Boris Lurie, collecting images. Richter planned to use the 4 photographs of Birkenau for a series of 4 paintings, which you can see here. In the first step of the artistic process, Gerhard Richter transferred the photographs to 4 canvases, thereby creating 4 figurative images, which he then gradually painted over. He used the painting technique he had been using for years, in which he first applied painting with a brush and then distributed it with squeegees and scraped it off again. The process was repeated several times. With each additional layer of paint, the painted photographic template disappeared a little more until it was finally no longer visible. In view of the horror and the incomprehensible crime against humanity associated with the German genocide, Gerhard Richter thus creates a process of abstraction that ends in a refusal of direct depiction, in the sense of Lanzmann and the SHOAH film. With the process, Gerhard Richter found a way to to access documentary material, the photographs, without showing it directly. But finally, he titled the 4 abstract paintings Birkenau. Boris Lurie intuitively felt that at the beginning of his memory process, he needs images before he could first find words for the trauma of his experiences in German camps. We know from trauma research that pictures come before words as testimonies of the truth. It is actually precisely in therapeutic practice that traumatized people are able to visualize forgotten experiences long before any verbal formulation. Psychoanalysts who deal with psychotraumatology state, quote, images are closer to the right brain hemisphere, which is assumed to be able to store traumatic memories which are not yet accessible to the verbal representation of the left hemisphere. In this respect, art proves to be a unique medium for the visualization and processing of traumata. The best chance a traumatized person has of restoring the broken bond with his inner self is to try to strike up a creative dialogue with the trauma. An artist will do it symbolically by trying to objectify his trauma in his work of art. Artistic work mobilizes one's intellectual, imaginative, integrative, and manual skills. It counteracts the tendency to inner disintegration. Thus, the road to the past, to the center of pain, will go via the images, which will help the traumatized person to again develop a feeling for his identity, autonomy, and his self-worth. So with the example of Jewish artist Boris Lurie, we will see that the images of his artwork, which he had wrested from his own repression and forgetting, were first steps in facing his trauma. It took more than 20 years after the events before he was able to return to the scene of the crime in Riga in 1975 and began his literary confrontation with the German genocide. You see here a map. It's called Fragments of Jewish History on the Map of Riga, which he was hanging in his studio, as you can also see in the exhibition in New York. Before he started his memoirs, he felt another medium is needed, one not yet discovered, and he found it in the assemblage and collage. Boris Lurie was born in Leningrad, St. Petersburg today, in 1924 as a youngest child of the dentist China and the businessman Ilya Lurie. With Lenin's death and the beginning of Stalin's rule, his father abandoned his business in Leningrad in the same year and moved to Riga, the capital of Latvia. The family followed him in 1925. There, Boris Lurie attended the German language Jewish private SHOAH high school and learned also there English, and he was fluent in Russian and Latvian. After Riga had been occupied by the German armed forces on July 1st, 1941, persecution of the Jewish population began immediately. Aside from the physical elimination of the Jews, the German military occupation regime had also planned the economic exploitation of the productive Jews as slave laborers. There was also a unit of Latvian auxiliary police, which was under the command of Victor Arais. In July 25, the reporting obligation for all Jews was introduced in preparation of setting up a ghetto. You can see here a photograph, which was fenced in on October 25 and locked by gates, which were guarded by the Latvian Special Police under Victor Arais. On November 27, and here's another photograph with a yellow star on the back. They were commanded to wear them. On November 27, I'll just show you here. This is the ghetto here on the right side. You can see an enlargement from the map here. This was a ghetto, a block of 4 streets was detached as a small ghetto. And on the other side was a big ghetto where groups of Jews were gathered for evacuation from the ghetto, as we will see. Since September, Lurie's family lived in the ghetto on 37 Lutzer Street. You can see the painting of Lurie, and on the other side, you see the building as it looks today. Yellow, I quote Lurie, yellow and glowing in the afternoon sun. It is the only 4 or 5-story building set amidst lower houses. My stoic mother made up father's mind. It was her decision. She, my sister, Jeanne, and my old grandmother will go with the evacuation. My father and I will go to the Arbeitslager. At the juvenile age of 17, Boris Lurie had to witness how his mother, Shaina, his grandmother, and Jeanne, the younger one of the 2 sisters, waited in the large ghetto for their evacuation, which in reality was a deportation into the Lumumba woods, 10 kilometers in southeasterly direction. There, they all had to undress until naked on December 8, 1941, in the middle of winter, and they were shot in excavated pits. Among them, Boris Lurie's juvenile love, Lumumba Is Dead. He was also killed. It was after November 30, the second action, which resulted in the murder of a total of more than 30,000 Jews. So you can see here the studio wall of Boris Lurie's, and you see photographs of the shootings in Lipaia on the left. And on the right, you see a photograph of his young love, Luba Treskunova. You can see that also in the exhibition in the Jewish Heritage Museum in the back, and the photograph of her on the left side. In confronting the 2 images of the naked women before the execution in Lipaia, it's a different spot, and in the portrait of the juvenile love, he tried to imagine the concrete situation in the Lumumba woods. And he had that always present in his studio every day in New York. What happened there was, I quote Lurie, was for me all like a horrible dream. Later, it all came back to me, but that was much later. Against all probabilities, Boris Lurie was successful, together with his father Ilya, to survive the ghetto and 4 camps, 4 German camps, for the following 4 years, thanks to his physical fitness until the end of the war. After the liberation from the Buchenwald satellite camp in Magdeburg on April 18, Lurie did not see himself as a humiliated cassette prisoner. Quote, I was with the victors. I was not a surviving cassette prisoner. Lurie emigrated by chance to America in 1946 because his sister Asya, who lived in Italy and came before the war to New York, she lived in New York, and that was a reason why he came by chance to America, to New York. After his arrival in New York in 1946, he started with drawings to recall the time in the ghetto. You see here examples of the war series. One of the first drawings was his self-portrait, see here, Untitled Self-Portrait from 1946, which depicts him with a grim and sad face. Among the war series is also found a painting entitled Portrait of My Mother Before Shooting in 1947. Lurie paints his mother like an apparition in a dream from a different, far away world. Her eyes are absent as if she were already in the hereafter. In May 1996, he writes a poem with the subject of his pain over the loss of his mother. Where should we fill anxieties if mother bones are splintered such? After his arrival in New York in 1946, he worked as an autodidact successfully in the tradition of Kubin or Ludwig Meitner in presenting impressive scenes from the camp's hell, such here as Back from Work prison entrance. The painting shows a stream of panicky prisoners who, accompanied by flame-like phenomenal flight, are pulled as if by a current in the camp gate, which at the same time looks like the mouth of a cremation furnace. The world stopped to exist in this painting. Violent engulfing is the only reality. And this painting is reminiscent of Baroque paintings of hell, or for instance, in the anonymous piece of a folk art Mensche in the Hofburg Brixen, where I found that, showing Herod driven by devils into the gates of hell. In another painting, Russian prisoners being punished in Stutthof, that was the camp on transit from Riga to Magdeburg, 2 guards are set up at the entrance of camp barracks like sentries, wearing appended waist pails of helmets and shouldered broomsticks as rivals. The prisoners, called harem masters, who had already given up on themselves, are shown in soft flowing forms and are dipped into a magic twilight. All these studies, still in the style of paintings of representations, the surreal hints, were private paintings for Lurie, which he had never wanted to put on exhibition during his lifetime. I quote Lurie, "Very briefly, I had wanted to do these illustrative memories, but then after I learned a little in art history, I found out that illustration is not the proper art." Quote, and Lurie preferred not to transfer his experiences and memories into dramatic, theatrical scenes, thus not historizing, namely transferring them into symbolic imagery. As the builders of Manchas do it with Bad Herod, who is carried on a sedan chair to the depths of hell. Lurie said, "I then painted the dismembered women. For me, they were all a symbol of New York, that they all are really that fat, really cut up. That surely had something to do with the past, but I had not understood at the time. Intellectually, I had no understood at all. He did that unconsciously. He didn't realize what he's doing. And Women in Courtyard, which you see here, is presumably the first painting of these dismembered women. Its scenery recalls a harem, the closed-off, guarded domestic space where the women and minor children of a patriarch live. Usually, they are enslaved women. In their nakedness, the women are exposed like slaves to the gazes of the viewers. One standing woman adopts a pose of attract attention with her breast forward and her hands propped at her sides. If you look more closely, we are shocked to determine that the women of the bodies are divided into several parts. The head floats slightly above the torsos of the head, and breasts are separated from the stomach, pelvis, and legs. These disintegrating bodies are disturbing and recall the parts of corpse and the famous photographs by the Allied forces taken after the liberation of the concentration camps. Boris Lurie would later cite such an anonymous photograph of naked corpse living crisscrossed on the open bed of a trailer in 1961 and title the work of his as Flat Car, Assemblage 1945 by Adolf Hitler. The motive of harem or bordello is not coincidence, as Lurie emphasized. We were against marketing of women in the mass media, and further on, we were against commercialization of sex by women themselves. No satisfaction without spending money. That means in my pinups, there had been rage against women. The pinup mixture, to me personally, as well symbolized the mass graves in Riga, where mostly women were killed. You see, there is a direct relation between these paintings and later collages and his memories and his imagination, what happened there in Rumbelau, which he couldn't see, of course. He couldn't only imagine what happened there. 14 years after the liberation in 1945, the dramatic events of this detention in the camps are deposited for the first time in his painting, which you can see here, Liberty or Lies, 1959, 1960. It's in the Tel Aviv Art Museum. The title of the painting, Liberty or Lies, may be understood as a sarcastic comment of his inner conflict between lies as a mortal threat in the camp and the promised liberty in the new yet alien homeland of America. Present and past are here inescapably overlaid. For the first time, he was able to let the stream of pictures flow freely from the past. Thus, a new form develops, unplanned, to record the flow of memories, to provide it with imagery and design. In his memoirs in Riga, which he started much later in 1975, Lurie writes that this painting, in which you ruthlessly superimposed alternatively your past history and the experiences of the American reality of the late 1950s and early 1960s, until all these disparate little chapters covered over and extinguished in the process of painting, yelled into a unified work in this painting. Inaugurated for him, this is inaugurated for him, a new art from a full and reckless and conscious sincerity and openness. That's what he remembers in his memoir in 1975 about this painting, which he did in 1959. This new artistic method for him was arrived at by unconscious action, gesturing, by instantaneous projections of the mind, immediately fixed on canvas. And that was art, not Dada or anti-art, he says. In the painting, 13 dates are mentioned. For example, here you can read December and 8. For the second deadly action in Rumpala against his grandmother, mother, and younger sister and lover. And April 18, which you can read here, 18 April, on the right side, right down on the painting, was a day of liberation from the satellite camp in Magdeburg in 1945. In between, you see the name of his sister, Jeanne, who died there in Rumpala. Photos are seen, for example, one of the ghetto, you can see here, in Riga. Then you find newspaper clippings, photographic renditions of these paintings. For example, the dismembered women. A passport photo here on the left by him. And the images found with report and control this memory. It comes to, you find the passport is here on the left, yeah, exactly. And then you see here on the right, the Star of David on an orange-yellow patch with color gradients, such as it had been introduced by the Nazi regime in September 41. You saw the photograph in the beginning as a mandatory designation of the Jews. And then the photograph of his lover, Béatrice Lecornu, the French lover here. You see her in the middle, about the middle, from whom he had just separated after 10 years while this painting was created. All of these pieces are connected to a chaotic assemblage. These scraps of memory of the dramatic past are embedded between advertising shreds and high-heeled, for example here, high-heeled shoes, which are reminders of an erratic shoe fetishism. I show you an example of the dismembered women here, dismembered women, but which also remind us of collections of shoes and other belongings from prisoners in the death camps. There is for example, there was an old lady who was doing like being dead, and all the women were putting their shoes on her. And these shoes, that's really is something very important for him. There's always coming back in his paintings. For example, he did this little sculptures of shoes. And in this painting, which he called Salad, ironically, he tried to mix together in swirls of colors an undigested salad. And this title is provided for a collage from 1962. Using the means of assemblage, Lurie picks up the new techniques of pop art, similar to the way of Robert Rauschenberg, for example, in this installation Odalisque. But in their statements against pop art, Lurie and his friends indignantly rejected this political, playful, deliberately unserious approach to materials and themes by the pop art artists. Lurie also incorporates everyday objects in his paintings and lets them appear like a piece from daily life, not like serious art. Lurie welcomes these practices as they correspond with his intention to leave the brutality of his experiences raw and undigested and not sublimating or idolizing them, like in these early paintings he did. Since his confrontation, as he called it, with his New York art world concentration camp, Lurie's art aimed not at sympathy for the victims of the Shoah, but rather at shock, a kind of shock therapy that combined the mountains of naked corpses of the Holocaust with nude pin-ups as products of the same inhuman system, as he saw that, in order to tear the public out of its self-satisfied passivity and draw its attention to the continuity of violence and contempt for human beings. The initially unconscious handling with pictures is already the second step after these early paintings to a conscious understanding of his own self in his subsequent literary work, which comes then as a third step. In the dream vision, visual logic of the picture is replaced by the work of compression and displacement. Lurie changes the set pieces of memory and the images found which support and control this memory, and comes to a quest of finding new images into a novel and unique synthesis in this painting, Liberty or Lies. Lurie wanted his art to have an impact, be a driver for change, and he wanted to better understand not only his own situation, but also America, New York, his new home. As a political artist, he rejects the American imperialism. For him, that means coming to terms with the past and also the present at the same time. In his American exile, and especially it would mean to grapple with the New York artwork, what he always called the New York artwork concentration camp. He fights against the octopus of the art market and refuses any art practice which degrades art to a consumer good. Lurie does not want any anti-art in the sense of overcoming and dissolution of art into life. That was a program of the avant-garde. For him, art is much rather a medium for survival, a survival art or a means of life, like foodstuff. Only slowly did it sink in how foreign to him this American materialistically inclined consumer culture was, in which the beingness of things had lost its innocence by entering the sphere of capitalist circulation. He yearned for Europe, for the culture of France and Italy, but also for the Latvian and Russian languages. From 1951 onward, he went on many trips to Paris, Milan, Rome, Spain, and Israel. Titles of paintings such as Adieu Amérique are reminiscent of his desire to leave America again as quickly as possible. It's a French title, Adieu Amérique. Here you see the painting December, also Adieu Amérique, be called, or Lumumba Is Dead. There was a series of paintings. And this one is called Lumumba Is Dead. It's the same year, that was on view as in the same year as Liberty or Lies. The center of December is formed by a red Nazi flag with a white circle in the center that frames a head whose physiognomy resembles Boris Lurie. The mirror reverse swastika cuts through his face, whereas with the headline Adieu Amérique to the left of the painting, he wants at the same time to bid farewell to America, the American mass culture that encircles and besieges him with pin-ups and product advertising on the red fabric of the flag and around it. In view of the overpowering abundance of naked women in provocative poses, it is clear how much the affluent American society of the time oppressed the surviving inmate of the camp system. The scene in the center is flanked by the word December at top right. As a cyber for the Germans' mass murder in Rumpela Forest on December 8, 1941. And the name Lumumba on the left as a beginning of the sentence that ends a statement on the right side of the painting with the word "is dead." The terror of National Socialist State of Germany in 1941 is, as it were, continued in 1961, Lurie suggests, by the United States of America, whose Secret Service, the CIA, had Lumumba, who was being protected by UN troops, murdered in the Congo, presumably by personal order of the United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower on January 17. He and two supporters were shot on the edge of a shallow pit near the Congolese city of Elizabethville, now Lubumbashi. Also characteristic of the ambiguities with which Lurie works, however, is the interpretation as Adolf Eichmann's. Here you see is that the end of the word. Yeah, it's interesting that we can think this is Boris Lurie under the swastika, but when you compare that with this page from the Life magazine, you can see in this painting, it's Adolf Eichmann's head, which functions here like a spider in the net of totalitarian imperial systems. A pen drawing on the left by Richard Poole in Life magazine, that's in November 21, 1960. It's exactly the time where he painted this work, proves that. It appeared next to an announcement of Eichmann's confessions in the upcoming issue of Life. You can see Eichmann confesses. There you can see the whole page. Eichmann confesses. Harry Golden reviews and extraordinary documents to appear in Life. It may have attracted Lurie's attention because the page appeared between a report of crazy party talk. Here you see on the right side, about on the upper side here, Mad Divine cocktail chit chat, and a female drum major, a surprise boot at the game here under. The notorious sandwich principle of German genocide and advertising. The already mentioned art critic Huberman wrote in November 21 in Art Letters, Lurie's savage artworks, which juxtapose concentration camp images with brilliant pictures culled from softcore porn magazines, were designed to confound assimilation by the art market. One review called them Life magazine taken to its final, ultimate, absurd and frightening conclusion, pain and death given no more space than pictures of Elsa Maxwell's latest party. As a survivor of German genocide, Lurie comes to the realization of living irrevocably in another world, on another planet even, in another value system. Any understanding seems virtually impossible with contemporaries who had not experienced the Nazi camp system on their own mind and body. Possibly it is just art alone which can build a bridge to the other side. Instead of leaving the United States, Lurie in early 1950s, still on his way to a career as a gallery artist, established together with Sam Goodman as an answer to this situation, the No Art movement against abstract expressionism and pop art, and adamantly refused to be a part of the art market. Their exhibitions took place in the March Gallery. You can see this is like a cellar in the 10th Street, the very famous 10th Street galleries, a sort of artist cooperation. For this show, they published No Show Manifesto in 1963. And in this No Show Manifesto, Lurie writes, "We joined forces because we felt stronger in the group. Everybody pulled another one along in the fight against the inhuman business, art market business." One of Lurie's most shocking and harrowing collages is Lolita, 1962. A torn off piece of the poster for Stanley Kubrick's movie can be seen, which was released to cinema in early 1962, the same year. The portrait of Sui Lyon is tilted by 90 degrees and rests on the bottommost edge of the canvas. Her gaze is oriented towards a black and white photo glued onto the canvas in the upper left-hand corner. The photo shows dead people in barracks, which had been set on fire before giving up the camp so that the inhabitants perished in the flames, while trying desperately and in vain to find a way outside from underneath the barracks wall. In contrast to this, we see the famous photo of Bert Stern with the actress Sui Lyon with the heart-shaped sunglass lenses. If you look behind Lolita's glasses, you will see that she is looking directly at the Führer. Here, Lurie uses the gaze of a movie star who fascinates us with her seductive eyes in order to divert our perception to the horror of the barbaric violence against the Jews in the concentration camp. The confrontation with a shocking document thus triggers a short circuit in the viewer's consciousness, which should shock us. In the United States, everybody had actually seen at one time or another after the war the horrible photos by Lee Miller or Margaret Burke-White. You see here Margaret Burke-White. It's a series of photographs in life which were not published in 1945, but then later in 1961 during the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. Lurie picked up precisely the phenomenon of saturation, which Susan Sontag was talking about as a certain degree of saturation, which you have in the context of seeing these photographs. They can be too much, done at least as much to deaden or our conscience or to stir it up. And this situation he takes up in this work, Saturation Painting, Buchenwald, a collage. It shows in the center of a soiled canvas removed from a stretcher frame, a photo of Margaret Burke-White, which she had taken on behalf of Life magazine in April 13, 1945. The photographs are published in that time, but for the first time this was published, the other one. Yeah? They showed prisoners in Buchenwald behind barbed wire during the liberation of the camp. The iconic picture then appeared in Times magazine under the title Grim Greeting at Buchenwald in December 1960. Lurie had cut it out from the magazine in 1960, cut it out. And the photo is framed by 12 photographic pin-up photos of a model in various poses. As if he had wanted to bring the cynicism of the American affluent society, for which all needs such as love and human closeness and all pictures, irrespective of their moral significance, had become products to terms and to a concept. The word saturation targets a flood of pictures which is to stimulate wrong needs and wishes. Lurie wants to intentionally disturb in aesthetic terms the beholder of this assemblage in the middle of an art operation which, due to its commercialization, constantly devalues the contents of artistic work, which is important for its survival and for his survival. The destruction of bodies in the Nazi cassette system is propagated in the devaluation of beauty sensuality and sexuality of women in the capitalistic process of exploitation, which subjects everything to the laws of profit. The probably most disturbing work was created by Boris Lurie. I showed that already, that car. And Lurie here used this anonymous photo, and he is indicating in the caption Adolf Hitler as the author of this assemblage, consisting of these naked corpses thrown pell-mell one over the other onto the open flatbed of a trailer. Lurie treats this photo as a find, as a ready-made. Around 1960, at a point in time in which autonomous art increasingly threatened to dissolve in action or performance art, which in the 1960s aimed at the cancellation of difference between art and life, Boris Lurie declared Adolf Hitler as the greatest performance artist. Because if art is to be transferred to life, then Hitler had been the greatest and most powerful, efficient artist, the artist with the most far-reaching consequences. With the example of extreme conceptual art, Lurie demonstrates the fatal consequences of a political avant-garde in the 1960s. In his work, Railroad to America is using the same photograph, but with a collage. Hitler's assemblage is being commended by Lurie, so to speak, by the confrontation of the catafalque with a pin-up photo, passed it over it, which shows the rear of a young woman who is about to take off her panties. The beholder is speechless in disbelief in front of this collage. The confrontation of life and death, which is in the tradition of Baroque Vanitas symbolism, is it a commentary with a brutal, thoughtless combination of German genocide documents with advertisement in magazines during the post-war period. You can see that here in this painting, please, and you see the finding he's using, the advertisement of this lady. Please, looks of a hair in different colors, like in Railroad to America. It's offered like a barber shop. You can looks of hair. You see them here on the painting, on the bottom of the painting, this hair locks as a presentation to choose the color of your hair. Theodor Adorno researched exactly this kind of cynic culture industry. After his return from his exile in the United States to Frankfurt am Main, Adorno refused, as it well known, any reconciliation with the past and demanded an uncompromising negation of the conditions and circumstances which had made Auschwitz possible. From artwork, he expected that it always and rigorously sounds out the meaningful context and turns against the meaning and against meaning at all. Boris Lurie also used all his energy not to give meaning to his experiences with the German genocide, and instead snatch it from oblivion and spread it. Spread it before his audience in his collages without any principle of order, to thus present it in the overall brutality and atrocity. History is not being clarified here to come to a conclusion. Instead, history will be short-circuit with the present. In his involvement show statement, Lurie declared very precisely, we want to create art, not destroy it, but state clearly what we mean, and that at the cost of good manners. Here, we will not find any secret languages, not refined excuses, no quiet discretions, no messages addressed to select listeners. Art is a tool of influences and warnings. We want to speak, shout, so that everybody can understand it. Truth is our teacher. We want no platitudes and sophistries, deception, conceit, lies. So, consequently, highlight and end of the group of the No Arts artists was a No Sculpture exhibition in 1964 at the Gertrude Stein Gallery with another manifesto, No Sculpture, on the left side. On exhibition, there were piles of shit made of wire and plaster as joint works by Sam Goodman and Boris Lurie, who had naturalistically painted the excrements. Each pile of shit was bearing the name of a gallerist, like Shit of Castelli or Shit of Sonnabend. The unexpected death of his father, Ilya Lurie, in 1964, and the end of group exhibitions of no art, effected in May of the same year, was the beginning of Lurie's withdrawal from the New York art scene. Quote, now we had blown up all the bridges behind us. At that point in time, the decision that he took as an artist were made for the rest of his life. He would never again sell any of his works. Much rather, he would buy them back. He was now living from stock market speculation. Art is art, money is money, stocks are stocks. The amalgamation of art and money is betrayal of the art. But that was his consequence. Money is money, art is art. And then he came for the first time back to the Lumumba Memorial in 1975. That was the third step, following the illustrations of his memories and the collages. Boris Lurie is successful in the transformation of trauma into the language of literature, triggered by the first visit in Riga. And you see here the monument, a mass gravesite of Umbula Forest, the site of his humiliations and nightmares. The memorial was first established towards the end of the Soviet Empire and dedicated to the dead Jews of Riga. In the 1960s, they were not even acknowledged as Jews. They were just acknowledged as victims of Soviet prisoners also. He wrote in his memoirs in Riga, which he started in 1975, quote, how will I be able to incorporate this Umbula into my life now that I have actually seen it? It is even worse in its real physical smallness than in the Götterdämmerung that lives in my imagination. How? Thank you for listening. I finished now. I can, of course, add something about the novel House of Anita. Here is another image of this memorial site. And this is Anita, a painting he did. And in this novel, House of Anita, he's comparing the art market, the gallery, with the Sadomaso studio. And in that time, before he did that, he did these hard writings and these paintings. And this is the stone commemorating Treskunova and Boris, the couple of love, which is, and he was looking for her and searching for her. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eckhart. There's so many questions, and the questions from the audience are also just coming in. So we'll get started. We'll go a little bit over time, just so we have a brief possibility to ask a few questions and discuss a few things. So Rosamond is asking whether you know how survivors respond to Boris Lurie's work. Have you heard about any survivors' responses? And also she's asking also about Holocaust deniers, whether they respond to Lurie's work.
I don't know that. I only know that in American museums, it's very hard to show these works. We tried to move the exhibition from Den Haag to the United States. I know that, but I don't know the reaction of survivors and also not of the Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, so Marcy is asking you to please say more about the artist's juxtaposition of the images of the post-war photographs of naked women and the corpses of the death camps. What is the message? Pornography, shock? Yeah, what is the message?
Yeah, the message is exactly what I said about I just show you this painting again. which is documenting his concerns, that is here. You see the mixture of, sorry, no, that's too far. Let's go back. You remember this Liberty or Lies, and then you remember this Lumumba Is Dead, and he's comparing here. You see Lumumba Is Dead, and here he realized that this Eichmann was between the party chit-chat and this advertisement. And
Eckhart,
yeah.
if you want to share your screen again, then we can see you can bring them back up, the images.
Can't you see it now?
No.
I'm sorry. What happened?
I think it looked like perhaps Ari stopped the sharing for the Q&A session, but if you share again, we can see them.
Oh, how can I do that?
If not, that's okay too.
I don't know. I have no choice here.
Only if easy.
There's nothing which I can do. I just
okay.
We just saw it, Eckhart. So
yeah, we did.
Question,
but you remember this mixture of advertisement and of Eichmann's portrait, for example. This mixture of dishuminations of women, which he realized, he came from the East, he came from Riga, he came from another culture, from a complete another world, and he came suddenly to New York, to this world art concentration camp, as he called it, in the middle of this advertisement of this misusing of beauty and of women's bodies, and that recalled to him the way what happened to the women which were killed on this the Lumumba woods, and he's comparing that. He's bringing that together to express his shock about the American culture, the American affluent society, which he thought it's misusing feelings like love. If you do advertisement with a beautiful woman and misusing her for that, for him it was, he couldn't imagine that, because he came really from this other culture, and he came as a young boy to these working camps, and from there suddenly to New York, in the middle of the capitalist world. And he was overwhelmed by that culture, and he could, like this Lolita, like this film, he compares that with these people in the camp which is burned down, and they try to escape, and they fail. So this is shocking, of course, and it should shock the viewer. That is his strategy, is his method. He's doing that very consciously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, Debbie is posting a comment that saying, I can tell you that my father, a Boris friend and also survivor, felt that Boris' work was very relevant to Holocaust memorial art. So, and other people say that it was disturbing in its content, your lecture, and so needed to see this. And I also feel, I thought it was interesting. I mean, in the Museum of Jewish Heritage, focuses on Boris' early work, so the War series, where he's really recording history mostly, the way you said that. And at the same time, I also felt looking for his visual language, his trying out different styles, different influences on him before he finds his own voice. And I think, it is very interesting that he completely turns away from that, but then starts joining those two images in his head, the things that he sees outside that is so completely untouched by his experience that he went through. And I think that's an amazing,
The early work he never showed. He never showed in his lifetime. They were not important for him. They were first tries to remember, but he said, no, that's not enough. That's not helping me. That's not, I can't really deal with that kind of images. And he said, well, that's old fashioned. This is not really functioning for me. And what he really wanted to show the viewer and to shock the viewer is to compare the destruction of bodies in the Nazi KZ system and the devaluation of beauty, sensuality, and sexuality of women in the capitalistic process of exploitation. He was comparing his exploitation as a slave worker with the exploitation of women's bodies and beauty. Like I showed this example from this hair DOS, this hair DOS, which he very often is citing in his paintings. There's a big painting of 4 meters long, where he used 4 or 5 women with his hair DOS in different colors. And it's over the No and over the concentration camp photographs and over this pornographic photos. This is for him very important. These are the highlights of his work, and which he wanted to show to the people, not to sell them, but to show them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So David says, it seems to me that the pornographic imagery just juxtaposed to images from the camps points to the pornographic exploitation of the images from the camps. It must also have been a shock for Lurie to experience that life goes on, business as usual, even after a world-shattering atrocity. And Joanne asks, Sarah, what are your reflections, reactions as a curator on Dr. Gillen's lecture?
Oh, well, thank you for that question. I mean, first of all, thank you so much on Dr. Gillen for your lecture. I think given the way that I have been steeped very much in Boris's early work, as we've been talking about, and particularly the War series, and also his, as you described, his kind of textual output, his memoir, his archives, his writing, the way he records his dreams. For me, it was really fascinating to dig in further to some of these, I guess you could call them less narrative canvases that really jumble a stream of consciousness in sort of a similar way that the memoir does, which I think is really interesting. I think there's this layering of time, you know, when you read in the memoir how Boris is on the streets of Riga in 1975, but recalling exactly what it felt like to be there before the war or during the war when he was in the ghetto. There's this kind of strange fragmentation that he picks up on in writing that I think is really interesting to compare to the works that you showed. I think it's really also amazing to understand how prolific Boris was. The amount of things that he had in his studio at any given time, you know, the way that he played with styles and the way that he played with expressing himself. I think what I kind of see in all of this is that there's so many different exhibitions you could make on this one artist. And there's so many different ways that you can examine his approaches to art making. I think he's incredibly versatile in that way. Yeah, I think I'm just absolutely grateful for the kind of expansion on really the themes that begin as the kind of origin story in the Museum of Jewish Heritage show, and how that sticks with him so much as an artist and as a person.
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting, Eckhart, that you said the access of our memory the access to images in our memory is so much faster than to words, to express trauma in words than in images. So that gives me a very new understanding of, looking at his work. And in the same kind of context, Lynn is asking, she'd be interested in hearing more about the relationship between the paintings and the memoir. For example, is there a visual dimension to his writing, or does he incorporate actual images in the text, or does he completely separate the two?
Yeah, he's integrating words, as you could see in this Liberty or Lies. The title is already very important to have these two words, liberty or lies, the cassette or the capitalist world, the promise of liberty, which is devaluation, kind of devaluation of advertisement. And then he was writing poems already in the 60s. He started with poems in his old Baltic German, which are very hard to understand sometimes and very hard to translate them. There is a group of artists in Munich that try to make a translation into English and make a kind of performance and composition with music about them. And you see, it took very long. It took more than 20 years until he could write about that. And it's very interesting when you read his letters to Fostel, which I found in the archive in Malpatita in Spain, that he tried many times to book a journey with the interest ship, with the interest to Russia and to Riga. Riga was part of Soviet Union at that time. And he failed 3 or 4 times. He missed the boat or whatever. And then finally, he could come there. And there was so much against. It was so difficult for him to overcome that, to go there to this place where it happened. And that was very shocking for him. And it was triggering then that he wanted to write about and to write his memoirs in 75. And he wrote on that for about until the end of his life, until 2008. And there are 700 pages, and now a part of them are now published in English. And that was a problem for him. And then he wrote this novel, Anita's House, which is also a kind of grotesque satire of the capitalistic art market and of these capitalistic galleries, where and there is one of the slaves in this house of Anita, and he's not realizing that he was that he was part, or that he was in this cassette system. And finally, his family is coming as dead people and remembering what he is, and he can't remember. And then finally he remembers, and the gallerist Anita, the dominating woman in this Sadomaso studio, she said, okay, they are welcome as guests, but they have to be cleaned, very much cleaned. And then they are welcome, and they are part of art, part of contemporary art. They are art treasures. And so he's comparing the art market in form of galleries as a gigantic laundromat, which will clean art down to the deep pores of all traces of history and individual suffering. That is his statement about the normal art business. And that's why he's doing something shocking, something different, yeah. And he doesn't want to sell that, yeah. That's why he started to make his own business, following his father and being independent. Money is money and art is art. That was his statement.
Yeah, yeah, true. Thank you so much. I just wanted to conclude. We went quite a lot over time now, but I wanted to quote Boris Lurie himself. He said, to survive is the ultimate act of creation, and to create is the ultimate act of survival. So I think that pretty much really wraps up what you have just said, Eckhart. And I want to thank you so much, and I want to give over to Sarah and to Ari to conclude the event. Thank you.
Rachel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both.
Rachel, thank you so much for the Fritz Ascher Society's partnership, and great thanks to Dr. Eckhart Gillen for sharing his very insightful scholarship with us and helping us make more meaning of the works that are on display in the museum and the rest of Boris Lurie's extraordinary work. We're grateful to you, Eckhart, and to all of you in the audience for joining us. Today's program was recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording in your email tomorrow, along with some additional resources to learn about the subject and links if you wish to support the museum and the Fritz Ascher Society's work. I hope everyone stays safe, and we wish you a great afternoon.